said, I'm a senior at Eldon High School. My name is Katie Jackson, obviously. I go to New Life in Barnett, and so tonight I'm going to be sharing kind of a long testimony, so just bear with me, and if my face gets red, just ignore that, because it will. So I hope that you can relate to this, and hopefully this pulls at your heartstrings in some way or form, because God is good all the time and He can really pull you through a lot. So, a lot of people know that I'm a child of God. I spread His word, how He's helped me in certain times of my life, some things that He's pulled me out of, walked me through, and delivered me from, but only some know how great, powerful, and merciful He truly is. Starting back 17 years ago, when God had been knitting me together in my bio mom's womb, my mom and dad had plans to get married. But life came along, and that just didn't end up happening. My dad started using drugs, and with this, he had anger issues, so this just did not mix. He would beat my mom and never got into any type of trouble for this. She had stayed with him for us, and also because she loved him. And one day, she decided enough was enough and took my older brother and I with her and her new maid. My mom stayed with him a few years, and in these few years, my brother and I would go back and forth between them whenever my dad had made time to see us. My dad had then ended up finding a new love named Samantha. When I was around the age of 3 or 4, I remember being put up on a bathroom counter and inappropriately touched. I later found out that this was called being molested. One thing led to another, DFS got involved, I was made to talk to a lady, but as a little toddler being in front of a stranger, I didn't talk. There was no evidence taken the day of, so all in all, basically, she got away with it. My dad and Samantha ended up getting a divorce, and for a lot of my life I struggled with thinking it was my fault in forgiving her. But with the help of some amazing people in God, I realized none of it was ever my fault. Forgiveness is hard, but we can do anything and all things through Christ as long as we truly rely on Him and allow Him to deliver us from what we need delivered from. Fast forward a few years, my mom met someone, had my little brother Logan, and we were all okay. Despite being moved around a lot and continuously having to make new friends and retain all of the life we had gone through, our needs were met and a lot of our wants too. Life then happened. Logan's dad cheated on my mom, got quite a few women pregnant, and this really messed up not only my mom, but our lives too. At this time, we lived in St. Louis with Logan's dad. With nowhere to go, my grandparents that lived here at the Lake of the Ozarks took all of us in, plus some. My mom had been dealing with her own issues, fell into drugs, running around, and just all in all relying on the worldly ways to fill her hurt. She was in and out of jails, prison, and rehab, and this time my brother and I were safe in the home of my grandparents. But as they became older and had already raised their own kids, they were not as active, so I not only kind of took on the role of being a mom to my brothers, but also being a rock and caretaker for my grandparents in the house. Fast forward a few years, I believe I was 11 or 12 at the time, I had gotten the news that my dad had been hit and killed walking alongside of the road in St. Louis. A few days later, my brother and I traveled up there for the funeral and such. A few nights before, or maybe even the night before, we showed up to my grandparents' house on my dad's side of the family. His side of the family was all there, but not only were they there, but I saw a familiar face. Samantha had been there too, along with my half-sister I had never met before. At the time, this was a huge shock, and anger built up inside me. Sometimes I still have the feeling of bitterness and anger, but God and I are working through that. Come the day of the funeral, I remember walking in and seeing all the picture boards the family and I had put together and my grandma had sent pictures of. Then I looked up and I saw my dad's closed casket. In a funeral, there tends to be an open casket to say a proper goodbye, but it had remained closed due to the damage. To this day, it's hard to comprehend that he is truly gone. No walking down the aisle, no grandkids, no father-daughter dances. But I remind myself that God has a plan. He makes a way when I feel there is no way, and that's what He has done for me through the hard and the good days. Fast forward, back home with my grandparents, reality had set in. Mom is still in jail through all of this, Dad's dead, a new sister, just life on top of life. Not too long after, I discovered an unhealthy coping mechanism called marijuana and cutting. I used these mechanisms to deal with my uncle getting murdered a year after my dad, my mom's continual absence, my little brother getting taken, and comforting my grandparents because they were upset too. Just genuinely using it to escape my reality at the time. Jumped to my freshman year, still using these unhealthy outlets, I fell into other things which led me to losing my virginity at the age of 14. Because I thought love meant giving someone exactly what they desired, and because, well, I was extremely naive and hurting. A few months later, I thought boys just wanted me for my body, my looks, and nothing more. So I came out as a lesbian. I ended up dating a girl for a while, thought I was this way for the longest time, until I came across a boy named Jordan. I thought, just as my parents were, that we were going to be high school sweethearts, grow old, and get married. I swore that he was the love of my life. I thought he loved me, knew me, understood me, and I did the same for him. But boy, was I wrong. A few months into the relationship, we had our first argument. He had pushed me off his bed, causing me to hit my head against the floor. He then started to apologize, but I had been crying, which made him even more angry. As I was propped up on my knees, trying to gain my balance, with him standing over the top of me, he had taken his knee and smashed my head against it a few dozen times. An hour or so later, I had put it past me. He told me it would never happen again. Again, I was wrong. A few months later, with some arguments, screaming matches, punches thrown, etc., we once again had gotten into a huge fight. I ended up getting out of his room, running out of the door, and I got as far as the driveway. He ran after me, dragged me back inside, slammed the door behind me, and started to beat me. After he had calmed down a bit, I somehow ended up getting a hold of my cousin. He came and picked me up, and we decided it was probably best to get checked out at the hospital. From there came CT scans, x-rays, police, counselors. As a girl in love, but also manipulated, I didn't want to ruin a future for him, so when the time came around to testify what had happened, I didn't. I went round and round with going back to him, and these times he and I started to get into drugs, partying, just all in all becoming more toxic than the relationship had already been. Ignore that, okay? Almost a year later of this routine, he had decided he no longer wanted me. We separated for good, but the partying and drugs had remained for me. After seeing what drugs did to my biological mom and dad, I swore I'd never do them, but life had other plans for me at the time. I had fallen into a really bad depression, discovered pills, meth, still was using weed, nicotine, and etc. The enemy just really had a hold of me and dragged me farther and farther. So how did I end up here? How did I find God and allow him to find me? One day, my grandparents and I got into a huge fight because I had felt I was getting mistreated. Juggling an addiction, being a backbone for them at points, wanting to be a teenager but also an adult at the same time, all of these things felt very overwhelming. I had ended up getting upset, which led to a reaction from them, which then proceeded to physical altercations, which should have never happened. I left the house with things in my purse that I shouldn't have. My grandmother decided it was best to call the police and report me as a runaway for my safety. When the police showed up, they asked if there was anything in my purse. Knowing they were going to search it anyhow, I handed it to them, and they found illegal substances. With the options of going to juvie or the hospital, I chose the hospital. When arriving at the hospital, they put me in a psych room, which at the time I felt like I didn't belong there. Looking back, for my safety, I probably did. Hours went by of people coming in and out of the room asking what happened, if I was safe in the home, the necessary questions they were supposed to ask. They had told me that it was deemed it not safe for me to go back. A couple more hours went by and no one came in, just me and my thoughts. I then began to cry out and say, if there is a God, if you are listening, if you truly answer prayers like I've been told in my life, please put me in a place where I belong, because I don't belong here or there. The night went on, and I had ended up falling asleep. It came 2 p.m. the next day. I had gotten taken into a DFS office to wait 8 hours for a life I could have never seen coming. As the 8 hours came to an end, one of the biggest blessings had come into my life, my foster family, but as I like to call them, my forever family. I had gotten into the car, and as I sat down in the car, on the radio I heard worship music. I knew at that moment, not only would things be different, but my God is real and he listens. In Matthew chapter 6:33 it states, but seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all things will be given to you as well. In my time of need and hurt, I reached out and called to him, and he heard my prayers and blessed me with more than I could have ever imagined. It also states in Romans chapter 12, verse 12, rejoice in hope, be patient in tribulation, be constant in prayer. In that hospital room, my dad passing, my mom's in and out, my own self-destruction, I didn't know my God at the time. I knew of him, but I didn't know who he was. I did not know what he could do or how good he truly is. So I ask you tonight to truly seek God. Get to know him. Sit in his presence. Open your heart to him. He will be patient. He will be waiting for you with open arms, but he won't wait forever. This life can be hard, And I don't like to promise things in life because even life is never promised. But one thing I can promise you without a doubt, that our God, my God, is real. And as everything else around you fades away, falls apart, and drifts from you, He won't. He is eternal. Choose Him, because the last promise I am going to make to you tonight is that His ways and His will for us is better than any hit from the vape joint or pipe that you will inhale. His comfort is better than any razor you can put against your skin. His joy is more fulfilling than any orgasm you could ever feel. His love is everlasting, unlike that guy or girl you rely on to feel wanted. Let Him in. Let Him move those mountains, break those chains, and change you into a new creation and version of yourself you will love and cherish until He decides He wants you home.